Hi, everyone. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance, standing at Steelmantown Cemetery, ready to give everyone a live tour as to what a natural burial preserve looks like and what to expect from it the perspective of a consumer and a provider as well, because I know some of our viewers will be consumers and there will be some providers to want to know what a natural burial preserve looks like. So welcome to Steelmantown Cemetery. As you can see, we're in the midst of fall, so the trees are starting to lose their leaves and change color. But this is a great opportunity for people to really truly understand, what a natural burial preserve looks like, and what the options are, and what this provides for, let's say, a provider and their business. It's really vitally important. So as we walk into the preserve, we're going to walk along this moss covered path, and you're going to see that we have stones here lining this path. And you might say to yourself, are all the trails lined with stones? And the answer would be no, because we have 3 miles of trails. But what this trail represents is our memorial walk. And what that means is that there are many families who have loved ones that they have their cremated remains that might be on the mantelpiece. And this becomes a wonderful way to memorialize them. So we give them the ability to buy these spaces underneath these individual rocks for direct internment of the cremated remains themselves. No biodegradable burial container needed. What they receive is the space, and then they receive a stone. They can be engraved, as you can see. So it's a lovely way to memorialize your loved one. Uh, like I said, with natural burial, of course, typically you can see here there's a painted version. Typically, people aren't choosing the cremation option, but it does happen. And in a place like this, you can also expect that you could do tree memorialization with cremated remains as well. So as we walk along into the actual preserve, realize that this place was designed for the living as a recreational place, somewhere they could come walk with their pets or ride their bike, or we even have people who ride horses out here. And then it's the perfect way to memorialize their loved one, or if someone chose this option for themselves, uh, the final statement in the life that they chose to live and lead. So as we come here at Steelmantown, this here, what you're looking at would be the only representation of what would be, maybe a conventional or a traditional cemetery. And if you see this area here in the middle with the tall wildflowers and weeds and grass and things like that, that's our meadow section, and that is a natural burial section that's laid out like a traditional cemetery, rows and plots that are a little smaller than the woodland ones. The reason I point this out, as far as hybrids are concerned, this is a good representation of what you may encounter at a hybrid cemetery. And tomorrow night we'll have a forum talking about hybrids, which would be, very interesting to people to see how that can play out in the conventional setting. But this gets mowed down once a year around Thanksgiving, and then we allow it to grow back. So this option here is available, and this is something that, many rural cemeteries or people on this call who maybe have interest in this or trying to create a space might be able to find a historic cemetery that could be repurposed and used for natural burial. Now, here at Steelmantown, we give natural field stones complimentary to our families. They can be painted, they can be engraved. That's a really lovely touch, for the potential provider to know that, the family doesn't have to do a lot of stressful thinking at their time of need. That, they can choose a stone as a family, which is really nice. At a natural burial service, kind of comes full circle when you're able to place that stone the very same day of the actual service itself. So as we come along into this trail, I'll stop for a moment and I'll show you a couple. Like right here, you'll see a good example of a natural stone that is engraved, and then next to it, you'll see a stone that a family had brought here. Unfortunately, in our operations manual, we don't allow stones like this, but they did have a natural stone as well. So I'm waiting for them to retrieve this, but this is something in a natural burial preserve that would not be allowed, would be something traditional or modern, polished. That's not something that really goes well in the forest setting. So as we go along into this part of the forest, what's interesting about Steelmantown is that it's very diverse. We're next to the 25,000 acre Belle Plaine State Forest. The property itself is a little under 13 acres, and we have a new growth forest. We have an old growth forest. So you're going to find some variety here. Right now, we're standing in pine trees and cedars, and this was a farm field when I was a child. So this forest is probably about 40 years old, and you can see these white oaks that are starting to come in. That's going to be the transition. Over time, the white oaks will take over, and there'll be the pines and things like that will be less sparse. Right over here, I do want to point out something here, if you guys can say it. This is a family burial plot, and you can see there's multiple burial stones here. People would ask us, how do you keep track of people in a place like Steelmantown? So what we do is every 5 feet along our trail represents a burial space, and we survey from particular survey points. And so that would mean that, like, for instance, these two reserved spots, a single plot would be a 5 10, 5 feet wide, 10 feet deep, and the burial would be oriented that way. If it's a double plot, as this one is, it's 10 by 10. So that gives you the ability to have burials in different positions. So, people will say to us, oh, can I be buried, over there by that pine tree 50 feet in the woods? We don't do it that way because it's a little too nilly-willy for us, in the sense that we want to know that we can keep track of our families. So it's advisable to do it in a way that you can, know where they are and be able to give them a proper deed and survey showing that. So as we go along into the forest, I'm going to stop along a couple different points here and show you different representations of natural burial sites and what they should look like, or what you might expect them to look like. And we're coming up to one right here, which I think is really interesting, in the sense that we have a burial that was done in a wicker basket, and then we have a shrouded burial right next to it right here. The shrouded burial is about 3 years old. That site is perfectly flat. You can see all the vegetation is starting to grow back. This spot here with the wicker basket is actually about 7 years old. And the reason I'm mentioning all this is that in a natural burial preserve, we allow biodegradable products, things like banana leaf, bamboo, wicker, pine boxes, banana leaf, things like that degrade rapidly, very quickly. Rattan wicker is incredibly strong. It may be very beautiful, but if you would like this appearance sooner than later, consider something different than wicker, in the sense, because you can see that this is mounded and it's very obvious. Eventually it will collapse and it will go back to being level. But if you're looking for something, that looks more natural quickly, for instance, the shrouded burial, about 95% of all the earth that's removed goes back into the burial site the day of the burial itself. So it almost appears as if there was no burial at all. Where, if you're looking for that rattan or wicker, that might be something you must stay away from. So I always tell people that we'll accept it. It's beautiful. But if you see mounded burials here in Steelmantown, more than likely it's rattan. So as we go along, you'll see different examples of reserved plots, which, plots where they don't have a burial, but someone's purchased it. And then, of course, active burials themselves. We do have what we call Tree of Life. Tree of Life are cremains plots that we mix the cremains within the soil that's excavated from the site, and then we plant a tree. But what we require here in Steelmantown is it be native to the Pine Barrens. We're located in the National Pine Barrens Reserve, which is one of the largest nature preserves, believe it or not, on the East Coast, and it's very environmentally sensitive. And cremains are acidic by nature, so it's very important not to put them in a lump or a clump, because it could be detrimental to the growth of the tree. So by mixing them in the soil that's excavated, that really helps, in the sense of taking it and not having that acidic effect. So as we go along, we're going to come into, what's interesting is everyone here can see the pine trees, you can see the cedars, and this is the first growth forest. And then we're going to go over into the old growth forest. And when I say old growth, it technically really is second growth, but probably about 150, 200 years old. And it's really an interesting transition. As you come through here, you'll notice that all of a sudden we're getting into to very large oak trees, red, white, black oak, beautiful moss, American hollies. It has a real different appearance, of course, than, let's say, for instance, here to there. And I would suggest to any of the would-be operators out there, not to say that you need a large space to create something like this, but when it comes to creating a little variety, it's always very important, to give that feeling to the customer, to the community, because when they come out here, one of the most wonderful things is that it doesn't feel like a cemetery at all. It feels very uplifting. It feels very good to be out here in nature, surrounded by by life and the living. Here in the Pine Barrens, we are very fortunate. This forest is full of food. This is high bush blueberry all over the place. The same blueberries that were cultivated that we eat today from the supermarket. Huckleberry. There's so much food here, and in turn, so much wildlife. So, when you visit a place like this, you're going to hear, in the morning in particular, so many birds, and they're going to make their home here. And I think that's really, really important for people to know that a place like this can act in a dual purpose, for the community in particular, if you're in an area that maybe is a little more heavily populated, in a space a green space that the community can come out and enjoy. So as we walk along, again, like I said, you'll see a variety of different choices of memorialization. Uh, a lot of places will say that they won't allow certain things that are personalized. Like right here, you can see that when people come and visit, that they write on stones and they leave that. At the end of the day, this was a human being, and these little things that people leave behind are very important to them. It's the sentimentality of people, that they want to remember people as they knew them. So, you could make rules and regulations saying that maybe certain things weren't allowed, like, of course, artificial flowers and things like that really are not allowed. And we have a document that people sign when it comes to that. But, little bits like this here really mean a lot to the families. We don't require that it's flat to the ground. Some preserves and conservation burial grounds do. We don't see any harm in having them upright. Now, of course, you'll notice as we walk along that a lot of these aren't very large, and you have to realize that we don't, and I'm sure, and I would advise most burial preserves not to allow heavy equipment to come into a place like this. We dig all the graves by hand, and it's important because you don't want to be too rough on the natural surroundings, and things like tractors and bucket loaders can be pretty brutal. You can see here is a grave site that someone's memorialized. We're down at the Jersey Shore. They brought some beach sand, some seashells. That's what's beautiful about this is, you've really created a lasting memory with this celebration of a life that was lived. What's most important about what we do is, the natural aspect, the environmental aspect is a wonderful benefit, to everyone in the living world. But ultimately, when you're memorializing your loved ones, you're celebrating a life that was lived, and you want to remember that, not try to forget it if it was an experience that was less than memorable. As you can see here, we do allow painted memorialization. Of course, we encourage that they don't use toxic paints or things like that. As you go along, you'll notice that there's many burial sites, and they don't appear to be burial sites, but they are. For instance, right here and right there, those are burial sites that nature has taken back. And what's most important to understand here is that nature is a great healer. It does not take long, if you do things properly, for it to go back into the natural order. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us back to a burial we just had the other day, and give you a good idea as to what that looks like, and kind of go through the process with you, so you have an understanding, not only as a family or a consumer, but Also, as a provider or a would-be cemeterian, the most beautiful thing about a place like this is, you can go to any landscape architect in the world and they're not going to be able to replicate this because Mother Nature is the one who created this space. And that's what's most important. Please try to remember that when you're in a place like this, this is the natural order. This is exactly the way it was meant to be. So, the hybrid model may be more attractive to certain people because maybe you're not akin to being in the forest, but that's why we have both options. It's wonderful to know that it's kind of symbiotic in the sense that they both go hand in hand. And the real low hanging fruit are the hybrid models. I feel like as the successes of the hybrid models come along, then you'll see more natural cemeteries because people will be desiring that. So as we come over here to this burial site, you'll notice that this was probably maybe about 5 or 6 days ago, I guess, that all of the soil, you can see is very sandy, was replaced back into the gravesite. Nothing was taken away, but all of the vegetation itself that was removed was placed back almost like sod right on top. All of that is perfectly fine and alive. That'll be back growing again in very short order. And it's important that you want to remember to do things like this because the idea of a natural burial preserve really truly is to let it go back to nature. So you don't really want to have large areas that will be opened up and will be, very obvious that, there was a burial forever. The idea is to create this kind of environment. So, when a family were to come out here, they can participate in every aspect of this ceremony. They bring their loved one back on an antique wagon. They place them on the gravesite. They're able to lower them down, backfill the grave. It's very cathartic. It's an exercise that's very healing for people. And many people will say, I don't think that I can do it, or I didn't know that I could do it. But ultimately, it's within our DNA. Everyone has the capacity to do this because we've been doing it since the dawn of time. And it'll bring you closer to death in a positive way. You will no longer fear it, and you'll say to yourself, it's the natural order. I'm going back to where I came from to become something else. So, to take that and realize that someone's moved on to something different, I think is very inspirational. So as we walk along, and you can see that this is a very heavily vegetated area, and this will once again, probably within 6 months to 9 months, you know, be right back to where it started, believe it or not. I'll show you some more examples as we come through. So, other ideas when it comes to a natural burial preserve for the community and for the recreational aspect would be that you could put up different specimen plaques. This is a white oak, that is a red oak. It makes it much more interesting and also an educational tool. We have in the past had school groups who have come out here to enjoy the property, not to learn about cemeteries, but to learn about nature. And of course, you could see like this stone here, when you're able to memorialize your loved one in this way, it has a lot of personality. It's really important. You can see that all this vegetation has come back perfectly. So, I know I've heard in the past people will say, "Oh, geez, you're damaging the ecosystem." You have to remember that this is a very passive uh, thing. It's not, you're not burying 10,000 people in one day. You might be burying several people a month. So it's really not hurting the environment that surrounds it. So, it's a very positive thing, not only for a place like this, but for the families also to know that this place is forever preserved. What's really interesting about that is that, cemeteries are by design, uh, they are they can preserve properties because once a cemetery, always a cemetery. So you don't have to worry about using this way that wouldn't be positive to what it was meant to be. Meaning that, let's say, for instance, a conservation agency would like to take property and conserve it. Well, sometimes nothing's forever in the sense that, you know, today it could be conservation, but maybe someday in the future that might serve a different need to the community and they may change that. where once a cemetery, always a cemetery. So when it comes to conservation tools, I don't know that there's one more foolproof than using a cemetery itself. I stop at this gravesite here momentarily to show you exactly what this should look like. This burial was about 10 years ago. If I didn't, probably would right by it. I tell my family that these are not meant to be manicured, not meant to be mowed or raked. Certainly, if a tree falls or a branch falls, it can be moved, but it's meant to be, nature. So as you're in a place like this, you come here and you can see it's a little more wide open. You have the ability to say to yourself, I would prefer to be more in the vegetation, or maybe I would like to be in an area that isn't highly vegetated now, but at some point it will transition into that older growth forest, and at that point it will be, but that'll be many, many years. As we come through here, and it's kind of right here might be difficult to see, but what we do with our cremated remains, with our tree of life, if you can see that back there, there's a stone back there, and that will have a tree planted there in the spring. But we do tree of life, and we take that off the trail system a little bit, and we find areas and spaces for those trees that will thrive. And what we do here in Steelmantown is, instead of sending someone to a nursery, let's say, to buy something, what we say to them is, you have the ability to choose a sapling right here within our forest. And what's important about that is that sapling has germinated here. That has, it was born here. So it has a far greater chance of survival. And, believe me, deer and animals in these types of places, they love tasty little treats. So a new something that's not used to this environment may fall victim to that. And as you come along, in a place like Steelmantown, you'll see some really interesting epitaphs. If you can't play the fiddle, you don't be in the band. And I think that's what's really interesting, is that you can really come through here and get a greater sense of who someone might have been. Over here now, we're coming into a part of the preserve, and I've cut off our tour today will be about a half a mile or less of the actual preserve. But you see how diverse it is. Over here is an old cranberry bog, and it has water in it about 9 months out of the year. And when I was a kid, it was a lake, and they took out the dam quickly. Since 1980, the forest has come back. It's mid-Atlantic white cedar. It's really, really beautiful. So as we come along, we're going to make our way into the historic part of the cemetery. I'm going to talk a little bit about the significance of that. And if you're a would-be cemeterian, the advantages of having things like that, and knowing that, it can enrich your community and also help restore something, give dignity back to the individuals who were laid to rest there, which many times are the forefathers, the people who actually created the community that you live in. So I think that's really, really important. But every area is going to be a little different, obviously. We have cemeteries all over the country, and it wasn't because we wanted to own cemeteries all over the country. Quite ironically, it was because we were burying people from all over the country here. And that's important to tell you, because why we did everything we did was because we had fallen in love with helping people. And we expanded because we wanted people to understand that you don't have to follow a textbook to create a space like this. At the end of the day, I'm no different than any consumer sitting out there. I didn't choose this profession. It kind of chose me. And ultimately, I did everything I did because it felt right. It felt right in the sense that, as a human being, it made sense. So, you don't have to say to yourself, oh, geez, we have to spend a fortune by hiring somebody. Certainly professionals are always great because they can help assist you understand how to do things and what the laws and what the regulations are. But ultimately, the actual product itself should be very organic. So, keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be something that is ready-made. Reflection pools and ponds, that might work in some instances, but if you're looking for the true natural burial experience, that's really not going to be something that people are looking for. They're really truly going to be looking for, nature itself. So as I come into this historic area, you can see this is just a very simple cemetery setting, very ancient. For instance, over here, this is my family cemetery from 1680. all the way up to 1840. And then this area over here was 1840 up until 1957. And then this area here is 2007 when Steelmantown first started offering natural burials. And we were the fifth natural burial preserve in the country. And that's how far we've come now, for everyone within the movement. This chapel, I'd like to show it to you so you have an understanding of what it is and what it symbolizes. We're non-denominational here, so we've served every walk of life you could possibly imagine. You name it, we've done it. And I don't know too many cemeterians or anyone else that's, has the distinct pleasure of saying that, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we may disagree in life, but we can agree in death that it doesn't matter anymore. So I think kind of unbelievably, we're finding some greater understanding and tolerance of others in this type of setting. So what's important to see is that you don't always have to have a place for congregation. We have viewings all the time. People will say, is it possible? Of course it is. Any funeral director that practices natural burial can tell you that with refrigeration and with certain circumstances, you can easily have a viewing. Certainly if somebody was in an automobile accident and it made it impossible, that happens, but that's understandable. But a space like this is very dual purpose. And when I say dual purpose, I mean that people will use this for funeral services, but not always. A lot of times what people will use this for will be for a celebration. And what happens is they'll take this room and they will set up tables, grass, and food, and they side service, and then they will come back here and they'll congregate and they won't leave. And it'll become part of that experience. If you were to have a space for viewing, for instance, what we do is we put 2 benches up at the front there in front of the old pump organ, and the loved one is placed there, and they very easily have a beautiful viewing in here. And it's a small space, but believe me, we've had some giant funerals here. People looking through windows and paying their respects coming in after the actual ceremony is, or the words are spoken. So if you're able to have a space like this, it's wonderful. We don't charge anything for this. We believe in value to the customer. Sorry about that, folks. I just got cut off for a second, but let me get the settings back here real quick. Let me see here. I do apologize. Okay. All right. So sorry about that. You know how technology is. Probably went into the chapel and it didn't like the reception. So what we have over here is an outdoor seating area, which is really popular. People love the ability to do this, especially on a lovely day. They'll have the hand-drawn wagon here with their loved one. Everyone will congregate and they'll have their service right here. So, at the end of the day, I think the real message is, this place is designed for the living, those who are left behind. It presents great opportunity for the actual families themselves and the community and the funeral professionals to embrace this new concept and really offer something unique. And what I can tell the viewers today is that what's really great about a place like this is that I have a lot of people who come to me who, of course, are environmentally sensitive, but the majority of them, believe it or not, are no different than anyone else that you may meet on the street. They just want something more simple. They had chosen cremation, not because they wanted to be cremated, but because that was the simplest option. And when they hear of something like this, they say, you know what, that's exactly what I've always wanted. And, I tell me more. I think it's important. So I hope you enjoyed this tour. I think it's good to see it. My greatest advertisement, and an odd thing to say, but is a funeral, because you'll get 100 people show up and 95 people will say to themselves, what exactly am I doing here standing in the forest? And as it unfolds and as they participate, at that point in time, they get a true understanding. And then they say to themselves, wow, this makes all the sense in the world. And, you know, simplicity, I think, is key. I think when you're going to be in a natural burial setting, you know, if you can really truly keep it to the basics, you know, going back to nature as you've come, you'll be better. You'll be much more better equipped to serve the community. So what I'm going to do real quickly is I'm going to put my camera back, and bear with me one moment. Okay. Alrighty. All right, folks. So I don't know if anyone has any questions for me while I'm here. Please, if you do, send them my way. I'm taking a look here. I'm not the most tech. Okay, let me see. So I have a question here. What happens when you change ownership, or in 100 years, will the cemetery be protected? So, you know, I've probably talked about this before in the past. If any of you have listened to any of my talks, you know, a cemetery company now is designed in a way that it lasts in perpetuity. It has to be a federally recognized C13 cemetery company with that line of succession set up in the beginning and approved, so that it doesn't ever fall away. In the past, you know, years ago, with historical cemeteries in particular, you know, the individuals, either the community might have left, or or passed on, or the religious organization maybe no longer existed. And then what ends up happening is the responsible people for that particular place are actually interred within the cemetery. So that becomes a situation where there's no one living that not only is responsible but can take care of that property. But there are ways to reclaim those properties and make them viable again. And I think it's important to do that. I think it's really, really important to look at the low hanging fruit, which is the hybrid and the historic models, and create more spaces, because every community has a Steelman. See what else we have here. There's how much does it cost to be buried here? So, all right, that's a good question. So in Steelmantown itself, our burial spaces are $3,500 for the space, which would be 5 by 10. If a family were to buy a double plot, it would be $7,000 with a $250 companion privilege discount, so $6,750. But you know, at the end of the day, it really depends on the cemetery's location and what their ability is to, and what the market will bear. Let's say, for instance, you know, I would say to the would-be cemeterian on this call, you know, we're very much akin to serving every walk of life. We don't want a place like this. Our philosophy, anyway, is to be a place of exclusivity. So we try to be very fair. Certainly, you'll find marketplaces where there's maybe more of a median income, so you'll see higher prices. But I would probably say our natural burial plot is somewhere between $2,500 and probably $5,000, depending on the location. And what I can say is that, you know, at the end of the day, you want to be in a preserved, protected place, knowing that it will forever be. So we have deed restrictions here, and I would suggest any natural burial preserve, not a hybrid, but a natural burial preserve, you know, consider doing that just to protect the rights of the consumer. Let me see here. I have if I still want my body to be preserved, is there an alternative to formaldehyde? Well, the alternative in natural burial is coolant, you know, refrigeration, dry ice. There are some green embalming fluids. You know, I can tell you this, there's no one who chooses this option, in my experience, and we've helped thousands of families, you know, that would choose to be from embalmed. That's kind of one of the things they want to get away from. But, you know, for instance, let's say someone passes away and they were not refrigerated properly. You know, for health and safety reasons, in many states, a body must be embalmed within 24. In some states, just a couple, and the majority, 48, for health and safety reasons. So that's why it's really important to prearrange, to let people know, take care of that, you know, really quickly. One's in a hospital setting, you know, fortunately they have the refrigeration services there. And then when you do choose that funeral provider, just make them aware of what your, you know, what your desires are, so they can make arrangements for that. Let me see. I don't know if we have any more questions, but know this, you know, you can reach out to me Personally, if you are a consumer with more questions concerning what you saw today, I'd be more than glad to answer any questions you have. If you're a provider, most certainly I would be willing to do that. Bear with me. It looks like, oh, so I'm sorry, one more question here. There was someone asked, what would hours be for such a facility? So, we're dawn to dusk. We do everything by appointment. This is kind of a rural cemetery setting, so the need for staff and someone being here on a continual basis is not really necessary. But that's really at a per basis. If you're in an area where maybe you've got more traffic, that might be necessitate that. But what we have found is that it's very easy to explain things to families when they come out here and allow them to enjoy the property. And then if they have questions, ask that later on. Uh, for the would-be cemeterians or entrepreneurs out there, the Global Green Burial Alliance is here to help you, point you in the right direction, help you understand what is needed to be able to achieve creating a space like this. And it's great. It's my pleasure to be able to show this to you guys today. I think it's important to see, touch, and feel. I always tell people the only real way to understand a natural burial or a natural burial space is to visit one. That's not entirely possible for everyone. And I hope that this inspires some of our providers or people or would-be providers to want to create spaces like this across the country. So if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank everyone for their time. Support the Global Green Burial Alliance. Become take the pledge as a consumer or as a provider. Let us spotlight your project, spotlight your, what you would like to do on our Spotlight Now. Reach out to us. Be part of our forums. If you have something interesting that you want us to help you with or get the word out, just let us know. We'd be glad to do it. So this was a tour of Steelmantown Cemetery. Ed Bixby, the founder of the Global Green Burial Alliance, and I want to thank you all, and thank you very much.